Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today, I am joined by the wonderful James Lloyd Dulin. Thank you so much for joining me today, James.
Thank you for having me. I'm really, I know we had a hard time getting this one set up together, but I'm glad we were able to find some time to chat.
Likewise, likewise. That's life, right? You got little ones, you got family, you got commitments. We do our best, and we're here. We made it.
There are so many like spring birthday parties and things like that. They just pop up left and right, and it's just like, it's very nice to take the kids and do things, but it takes over every moment of every weekend and all that.
Yeah, and we're coming up to end of school season as well, so
hmm
everyone's prepping for summer. It gets crazy. So I'm glad we were able to get time together to chat. I'm
Yeah,
excited because, as always, I've got lots of questions. So
good, good, good. I'm happy to answer them.
awesome. So why don't we start with a little introduction? Could you introduce yourself and your books for us?
Yeah. So I'm James Dulin. I have been an indie author for 2.5 years now. I started with my debut novel, No Heart for a Thief. I'm wrapping up my first trilogy, the Manitou trilogy, with Only a Grave Will Do, that comes out June 24th. So just in 2 days now. So I'm really excited to get that out there and wrap up this story for the audience. Um, and yeah, I originally come from Michigan. I've bounced around a lot. I've worked in education for the last like 12 years or so. So it's a little bit about me. And then I spend most of my free time either writing or being a father. And that's pretty much all my time. I used to be a fully developed person, and then I had kids, and everything shrunk into very compartmentalized pieces of my personality, I guess.
That sounds very accurate. Yeah, with those small moments where you're like, maybe I could dip into that old hobby, only to 10 minutes later be back at you're compartmentalized.
Yeah.
Yeah. For your books, I always love asking this question. I know
Mhm.
you're now at the end of a trilogy with a novella, a prequel
Yeah.
novella to it as well. What do you hope readers will get out of their experience from reading your series?
I think I struggle with this question because I very much believe that reading is something that you do that is separate from the author. Like
Mhm.
you read something, and it is your interpretation of the story. It is your reading of it that brings meaning to it. So whatever themes I want to impart, I also don't feel I have the right to dictate what themes somebody takes away from it.
Yeah.
Because, life experience puts you in different places, and so you get things from different words. I hope that they spend some really good time with characters they find authentic, that they can
Mhm.
see as realized human beings and understand their choices, even if they don't agree with them. I hope they can spend some time with these characters and really enjoy them. Um, I hope that they, see some connections to our personal history and lived experience as well. But I don't want to enforce what somebody has to take from words. I think that's the interesting thing about
Mm.
literature. Is like you can sit down and we can talk about what something means, and nobody's right,
Yeah.
and everybody's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a fascinating experience because I was recently having a discussion on Tori Talks channel. We were talking about
Okay.
Empire of Silence, and it came to a point where there were sections that some of us didn't enjoy. Some of us, really appreciated it for what it was, but it came to the topic of this section was intentionally done this way.
Yeah.
And then the response was, yes, but I can recognize that and still not enjoy what they did
Yeah.
there. So absolutely appreciate that perspective.
I think intention is a really interesting thing because it comes with a lot of assumption.
Mm,
We assume authors' skill sets, we assume authors' mindsets, and their point of view and their perspective.
mhm.
Um, I think it's interesting when people assume an author feels some kind of way because they write about something.
Yeah.
Um, which, gets into things like we see authors all the time write about marginalized, oppressive experiences and then support marginalization and oppression in real life. And
Yeah.
so the idea of intent it's a hard thing to quantify, and it's tricky.
It absolutely, and from the reader perspective, I also view intention as what they intended for a character,
Yeah,
not necessarily in terms of messaging, but as a means of getting character to point A to point B.
yeah,
Um, they intentionally had to develop them in a certain way. So yeah, there's so many different facets of it, and it's a long and I'm sure complicated topic we could get into.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, no, I appreciate your perspective on that because everyone's experience of books is going to be different. I think that's part of what's so fascinating about not just reading and the writing processes, but being able to talk about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
So, yeah, go
I
for
was
it.
just gonna say that's why I love book clubs. That's why
Yeah.
book clubs and that kind of thing are really great. The ability to be in a space where you can talk things out. I was lucky to have some early experiences in high school and things like that where we could talk about things and have some teachers that were interested in hearing about perspective, uh,
Mm,
which I think is a rare thing sometimes.
yes.
Um, and so, yeah, I think it's really important to give readers I, readers are on the same level as the author in terms of the story. We're
Mm,
both coming at the story from different perspectives and trying to understand it from our own lens. But a reader is just as right as an author about what is going on in a scene.
right. Interesting.
It's a conversation, I think. Um,
Absolutely.
I don't think anybody is in ownership of a story after it's out there in the public.
Yeah, I mean, look at classics, right? Those authors aren't here anymore to quote unquote defend their works, right? They're not here to tell us what they intended, or they might not have even had the chance to tell people in their own time their entire breakdown of their process. So yeah, I think it's kind of up to readers to have conversations, but I think part of those conversations is also that's really important is to let people have their experiences and let them articulate it without uh, placing boundaries around them or dictating yes or no, right or wrong, because that's a big barrier that a lot of us hated in English class.
Do you ever go online and see? I don't know if you're on TikTok. You are on
Mhm.
TikTok.
Yeah, yeah.
And see like breakdowns of movies or TV shows or books, and somebody's like breaking it down to the sentence level or the scene level or the dialogue level, and they're like, "This person's wrong because X, Y, and Z," like, and they
Yeah.
break it down and as if they're writing a research paper on a Marvel movie,
Yeah.
and like I'm sure research papers can be written on a Marvel movie. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's that's there. But the idea of trying to compete or debate over art is such an odd idea to me that
Yes.
like you're debating over somebody's interpretation and experience of something
Yep.
and trying to win. Why are we trying to win art? It's very weird.
Yeah. I think a big part of it is recognizing the ego aspect and taking that out
Yeah.
of the experience, or at least out of the communication part of the experience. I think that's a big part of it too, which it can often get lost for people, especially when it's a piece that they absolutely adore or
Yeah.
love. Not being able to separate that adoration for a piece can completely overtake someone's ability to see another perspective. So, yeah, it definitely yeah, it's a tricky field when you're
Yeah.
delving into those conversations.
Very, very, very much so. I just started watching. Murderbot came out just recently, and
Oh,
I
okay.
wanted to make sure I read the first book before I got into it. And at first, I had a jarring response because Murderbot was so fresh in my mind in terms of the novella,
Yeah.
uh, to the interpretation on screen.
Mm.
Because my mind version of this story and the how it was playing out on screen were so wildly different in terms of the interpretation of the main character.
Yeah.
And it's a jarring experience, and you can be and like I wanted to be like, they're wrong, they're doing it wrong, which is
It's easy to do. It's easy to
it's
fall into that.
yeah. But since watching more of it, I've been able to separate my experience from the book from my experience of the TV show and appreciate them
Mm,
both for what they are. But that first experience was like, he's doing it wrong. That's not this character. And
right.
like I don't know why I get to be the arbiter of that, having only just read the book. But
But it
it's
was your very fresh experience.
yeah.
So, if for some people they read the book and then years later an adaptation comes out and their experience might be similar or completely different.
Yeah.
Um, I think part of what impacts that too is a form of nostalgia,
Yeah.
right? We have a sense of nostalgia for how we connected or perceived those characters. Like I've read some of the Murderbot books years ago. I actually didn't know that they were coming out with a show for it.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, so I'd be curious to try the show because I actually didn't quite enjoy Murderbot.
Gotcha.
I found
Yeah.
him, and maybe it was the point of my life. I had
Yeah.
like a 1-year-old,
Hmm.
but I found him quite depressing and whiny, if that makes sense. Could have been the
Which
stage of my life.
Which is interesting because that's also how I read Murderbot. I as a
Okay.
very depressing character, um, and kind of morose about their own experience.
Yeah.
Whereas they're a little bit more quirky and actively violent in
Mm,
the Apple TV adaptation. Um,
interesting.
and not actively violent as if like they're going out there to kill everybody, but they're more okay with violence. They feel that violence is
Oh,
just a part of their programming and who they are, and
interesting.
rather than a depressed robot that doesn't like that violence is a part of who they are.
Right,
And so
and
I found those two
okay.
interpretations very different. They're
Yeah.
both good. They're just different to me.
I can completely see that because to me, that would then break down the integrity of the original character that was portrayed by the author. So, you're taking an integral part of a character and just saying, nah, that's not as interesting for film, which is completely
Yeah.
fair. Completely fair for it to not be as interesting for viewers because it's a different media. So, yeah, I could see the hurt if an integral part of your favorite character has been changed.
And not to be like Murderbot is not my favorite thing in the world.
No,
It's
that's
just
fair.
something I enjoyed the character more than I enjoyed the plot of the first
Mm,
book. Um, but it was just kind of jarring to see the difference. And so I
yeah.
get how people are um, they're very possessive of their favorites, and they
Yes.
they go on to debate everybody's opinion and experience of them.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's something that we got to push against ourselves in doing, though.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, self-reflection might help with that too. Thinking about it a little bit longer before, um, posting an angry rant video online might might help some people, right? We have Capricious Fox. Welcome, good to see you. They said I had a similar experience with the Lord of the Ring films when I first saw them because they excluded Tom. Since then, I've learned to appreciate the adaptations for their own and love them. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very different mediums, right? Different forms of storytelling when you're looking at film, TV versus books.
Mhm.
And so some things might not translate well for different mediums. And when you're looking at books, it's all up here for the reader,
Yeah.
right? They can imagine it however the author can say they're blue-eyed character, but someone will go, oh no, they're brown-eyed
Yeah.
because they just skip that part in their head.
It's interesting because there's a lot of conversation right now about adaptation,
Hmm.
and Hollywood is doing too much adaptation, or they're doing too many sequels, or doing this, that, and the other. There's nothing original.
Yeah.
And I think part of what we're having a difficulty right now with is the question of why adapt something. Because I
Mm,
think there are a lot of adaptations that do an amazing job and there's purpose for the adaptation. And then
yeah.
there's things like How to Train Your Dragon and Lilo and Stitch.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the adaptation is to do nothing with the film, except kind of degrade some of its themes, make it longer here, expand this part a little bit to make a little bit more money. So I think when I approach an adaptation, my question is always why,
Mm,
especially if I've loved something in the past in a different form. Why do we need it in another form? And I
yeah.
think some things are really well done, but like I'll see questions online like, which anime needs to be adapted next? My answer is none. Anime is what it needs to be because it has that cultural tone, it has that
Yes.
cultural those cultural touch points that is within the medium. That's where it belongs. And maybe some stories can adapt beyond that, but I think most of them don't do well because they lose the heart and the cultural touch points of the original medium. So there are some things that I don't think should be adapted, and other things that would make amazing adaptations.
Yeah, I'll completely agree with you on that one in terms of the why. I think some translate really well into adaptations and others don't. I'm also from the era of I don't know if anyone remembers this, but the old Dragon Ball, like 2000s Dragon Ball Z
Yeah,
movie. Don't suffer through that, please, if you're wondering what it is.
yeah.
I mean, it was banking on the name and the themes and the concepts, but in terms of the integrity of the characters and some things just didn't translate well, like you said, from an anime, it just didn't translate well, and it was a bit of an Americanized twist on something that's culturally completely different. So there's places for it and others not so much.
Agreed. Very much agreed.
Yeah. So, with that being our topic at the moment, I do have a question for
Yeah.
you for your own books.
Hmm.
Would you like to see them adapted to a particular format outside of a novel?
Oddly enough, I think the thing that is doing the best adaptation and the most creative adaptations and taking the biggest risks is animation.
Mm,
I think that we are seeing some amazing animation um, really take big risks and big swings.
mhm,
Whereas I think we're being a little bit more risk adverse with live action. Maybe that's part of the difficulty in what it takes to make it seem real, especially in fantasy or sci-fi with all the CGI budgeting,
mm,
and how much you have to pay your actors, and you know it gets expensive. But I think animation is doing some amazing things. Like the Into the Spider-Verse movies are some of the
oh,
best. I
so
think they're
cool.
the best superhero properties that we have out there.
Yeah.
Um, and Arcane,
Mm,
taking this whole world. It could have been this easy, cheap little thing. Let's connect it to this very popular video game and tell some backstory, and we'll get some people to watch it and get people into the game. But it ended up being this beautiful piece of art,
mm.
and so I think animation would be really interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I can see your perspective on that, especially if you're looking at things, animation styles that are as visually stunning as, like you said, Into the Spider-Verse and Arcane. I think too, you have a little bit more freedom with animation styles because, like, again, you don't have that CGI budget. I'm thinking back to the Avatar: The Last Airbender movie. You
Oh yeah.
know, that shall which not be named, but you know, there there was so many limitations in some of those choices that, they couldn't match the animation and its
Mhm.
capabilities. So yeah, I can see that. Um, so in terms of completing your series, this is
Mhm.
book 3 coming out, finishing off a trilogy. In 2 days, it'll be live for the world.
Yeah.
How does it feel for you as an author to have been with these characters for so long, this story, this world for so long, and to see a chapter closing?
I think my feeling on it will continue to evolve over the next few months to a year. I am somebody who doesn't necessarily um, understand how to contextualize my thoughts and my feelings in the moment.
Fair.
Sometimes I need some time and perspective. I do get teary-eyed when I read the last few chapters while I'm editing, and this is the end of this story. Um, there's definitely some grief and some mourning in terms of losing that connection to the story.
Mm.
But then there's also some excitement. Like book three was difficult at times to continue to come back to a story that I knew how it ended. I knew all the parts of it. I had outlined it. I'd really delved deep into how every piece was going to fit together so that I wasn't telling myself the story at the same time. I was more making sure it got down on paper and then fixing it and making it better
Mm.
and getting it to where it needed to be. Whereas my mind wanted to play. And
Mm.
I've been writing down ideas about new series and what I want to do here and there and the other. And so there's an excitement about getting into something new and trying out different
Mm.
characters and trying out different magic systems or worlds and just playing around a little bit because it can
Yeah.
be very hard to play around. I find, at least in my limited experience with a book three or a conclusion, that because there are so many ties to wrap together, there's less play, there's less
Right.
movement for an author to be able to play around with the world rather
Mm.
than like make sure that it all comes together. I think it's my best work in terms of focus and craft, but
Okay.
it wasn't necessarily my favorite to write because there was less play involved.
Interesting. So, do you feel like that aspect of book three provided you with a beneficial challenge to your creativity?
Yeah, I think in some ways, yes, I think restrictions can be very helpful for creativity.
Mm.
I don't know why my mind jumped to it, but I was watching something on. Do you remember the Batman animated series
Yes. Well, which one?
from like the 90s? The like
I
the
think so.
original, like the one that looks like it's set in the 50s, black and whitish aesthetic. Mark Hamill
Oh,
is the
yes.
Joker.
Yeah.
Um, they were so restricted in the ways the Joker could be violent. Um,
Mm.
so they ended up coming up with that laughing gas that like turned
Yes.
somebody into like a laughing monstrosity and they couldn't stop. And that was just so creepy, but they were allowed to do that and not gun violence. And so in a way, they got to do something more monstrous with the Joker and allow to show his character in a different way because
Yeah.
of the restrictions. The restrictions said you can't take the easy way and use a gun. You have to
Right.
find something else. And so I think restrictions can be very it can induce a lot of creativity.
Mm.
So yeah, I do think that the restrictions forced me to think about different ways to be creative.
Mm.
Um, and also it's each book is an exercise in learning craft as well. And I would
Right.
say I learned a lot from writing Only a Grave Will Do.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
always good to hear. I mean, for me, um, in general, whether it's writing or anything else in life, there's always opportunity to learn something or take something away. Not necessarily that you're actively out going like, "What can I learn today?"
Yeah.
But you will naturally take lessons away in one way or a form. So it's nice to hear that an author goes through that same experience. They never stop learning as they
No.
write.
Well, I hope I'll never stop learning. I think you can only stop learning if you shut yourself off to it. And so,
Yeah.
and you believe you know it all. I hope I never get to the point where I believe I know it all about anything.
Yeah.
Uh, because I think that's where we get some people that are really stuck in their ways in their elder years, and that doesn't say that's the same thing about everybody who ages. Like some people age and are still learning to the day they die, and they're really thoughtful and curious about the world, and I want to be
Yeah.
that way. Knock on wood, hopefully I have the time to be that person that's still asking questions, who's still just trying to learn something new.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Curiosity and creativity, I feel like they go hand in hand in
Yeah.
that regard. So, we do have a few folks here with us. Hello, Tim. Good morning.
Tim.
And we have Esme. Always good to see you, Esme. Thanks
Hey,
for
Esme,
stopping
thank
by.
you for stopping by.
So moving on to our next topic, because I personally, this is a little bit selfish on my part. I know
Yeah.
you've talked a bit about this in other interviews, but as someone who has tried and mostly failed to get into this, I'm really curious to your perspective
Okay.
on poetry.
Okay.
So I love poetry.
Yeah.
I struggle with actually reading it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I love it performed, but as soon
Okay.
as I it translates into reading it, I sit there and I'm like rereading lines. I'm I'm losing the theme
Yeah.
or the message of the wording, and I'm really curious as to your perspective on this because of your own history with poetry,
Mhm.
your own experiences. Um, what am I doing wrong?
For me, like I've definitely experienced that with some poetry books. It's can be difficult.
Yeah.
For me, it's all about finding poetry I find evocative,
Mm,
voices I find evocative, um, poetry that speaks to something that I want to read. Because there's
mm.
poetry about everything. You can read poetry
Oh, yeah.
about a rose or poetry about war, and it all exists.
Mhm.
For me, it was about reading about different people's lived experiences. I wanted to hear more about people. I wanted to get into their specific voice.
Mm.
Um, and so I found poets like Danez Smith, who's one of my favorites.
Okay.
Um, or I'm forgetting the name of the author right now, but there's a long epic poem called Citizen, and it's a series of poems all telling a story of uh, this woman's Black American experience
Mm.
and digging into it through several different vantage points. There's a book called Blood Dazzler that's all about Hurricane Katrina, written from very different perspectives. So residents, it's written from politicians, from the perspective of journalists who've had to cover the incident. And
Okay.
so, like, if you find a topic really interesting, find poetry
Mm.
about it.
Okay.
That was my entree into really loving to read poetry. Um, I also think you don't have to read the longest poems.
Yeah.
You can find websites that do um, that that post poets work, um, and you can find really short poems, really deep poems that you can love. Find a couple of um, online poetry magazines
Okay.
that
Didn't even know that existed.
oh yeah, um, find a couple online poetry magazines that are themed around something you're interested in. So for
Mm.
me, that was often social justice or something like that,
Right.
and so I'd get to hear a lot of different experiences through just following those websites and reading some amazing poets. Um, so that was it for me. And
Okay.
I watched a lot of poetry too. Poetry Slam was my entry point to poetry.
Right.
Um, and so, Def Poetry Jam from the early 2000s was
Yeah.
really what pulled me in and really made me interested in doing this. And so, watching it's not a bad thing, but if you're trying to read it, I would just say find the hooks that draw you, just like you're looking for a genre that draws you into a novel.
Yeah.
Find the genre of poetry you like.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll kind of share the two that I'm trying right now.
yeah.
So one of them is actually one that I found through video form. Helena Carter Bottom, is that her name? The
Helena
actress?
Bonham Carter.
Yeah.
From
Like
she was
every
in
Tim Burton movie ever.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So she was reading a few, and I absolutely love them. And basically, the theme is seeing everyday simple moments of life through a more beautiful phrasing, I guess is
Okay.
the best way. So I ended up getting that one, and it was the 365 poems for life, and it's just a compilation of all different kinds.
Hmm.
So I've been trying that one. So far, it's been a mixed bag. Some of them like, oh, this is yeah, beautiful way, and then other ones I'm like, what moment of life is this again? Some
Yeah.
just don't hit, others do.
Yeah.
And then the other one I've been trying is actually I don't even know if anyone knows this book, but the actor Jonathan Lithgow.
Okay.
I loved him growing up. I watched him in Third Rock from the
Yeah.
Sun. Love his performances. And he actually has a book compiling his own favorite poems. His grandfather
Mhm.
was a very poetry oriented man. And so he would, or was it his grandmother? I think it was his grandmother. She would actually recite them from memory. And they were long, long poems, and that was their story time. And so he will give a little introduction to the poem of who wrote it, a little bit about the author, and then
Mhm.
he'll share the poem and then give his own takeaways and experiences. And I think that's been helping a little bit as well, just in terms of hearing his own experience, because again, there's those poems where I'm like, I have no idea what I just read.
Yeah. I I think you can also find poetry that's more abstract, or poetry is a little bit more concrete, or
Mhm,
has some more its meaning is a little bit more clear for a reason, like it wants to say
mhm,
something. Um, for me, the eh, I like to find a balance between the two. Like if
mm,
something's just too over the top, like in your face with its messaging, it can be it the form of poetry kind of is lost from it a little bit.
right.
Um, but if it spends too much time in analogy and metaphor without saying much of anything, like it wants to be like you sometimes I can read a poem and feel like this author wants to be dissected in a poetry classroom rather
Right.
than read by anybody on the street. Um,
Yeah,
and that poetry is not for me. I don't care how clever you think you can be in a poem. I
yeah,
want you to be vulnerable and effective and grab me with your words. I don't want to have to like look up things and try to dissect and then have to read 3 books to understand your reference here kind of
yes. Turn into an entire project
yes.
rather than an experience, yeah. All right. Well, I will continue to look, and I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
I would also try shorter books than that. That's a thick 'em.
It is, but each poem is only like less than a page.
Gotcha.
So it's like you read one a day,
Okay.
basically. So it kind of like you can see here. I'll try and show you here. Like these are the poems. They're not
Okay.
very long.
Yeah.
They're not like 100 pages.
Yeah.
So I think that's partly what drew me to it as well, was they're short, they're digestible, hopefully. But I think part of it too is some aspects. Like I did try Emily Dickinson.
Mhm.
I just don't think
Yeah.
the modern world that I see, I just have a hard time connecting with it. I love classics and I love
Yeah.
historical fiction, but there was just something about the poetry aspect of it that I was like, where are we?
Yeah.
What did that word mean? Like, how is that socially inappropriate, you know? Those kind of things. Even though I'm
Yeah.
familiar with it, it just didn't click with poetry. And then there's the flip side of Patrick Stewart, right? Reading the
Mm.
Shakespearean sonatas and
Yeah.
poems. I actually got the book that he reads from because I was so curious. Because the performance he gives is beautiful,
Yeah.
right? And it's just I'm like, "Oh, that's such a beautiful poem," and then I actually read what the poem means. I'm like, "What? No, that's completely different."
It and that's the thing with performance, like, if you're listening to an audiobook or whatever you're listening to,
Mm,
like, that performance can give so much to the words on the page,
yeah,
and that's part of why people love to look up, like, a YouTube poem and feel
yeah,
like they connect to it, because that performance also tells them something beyond the words.
yeah. Yeah, and from my perspective, I try and connect it to the part of my brain that is music oriented, right? I play
Yeah.
instruments. So I try and see the musicality throughout the
Mhm.
performances too. And I think that is why it connects a little bit easier until I actually look up what it means and then, you know, get a
Yeah.
little surprised there. Um, but yeah, so we have a game to play. Thank you again for that. We have a
Of
game to
course.
play today.
Yeah.
So in my last interview, I had done an agree or disagree game as a means of learning more about an author and their own experiences. So today we are going to be playing Would You Rather, bookish edition. So I have a mix of different would you rathers from a
Mhm.
reader perspective and some from an author perspective. So we can kind of get to know both sides of you
Yeah.
in that regard. Some of them might be quick responses, no explanation needed, and others you might want to delve into. So feel free. We'll do as many as we can comfortably get in. And for those watching now or later on in the replay, please, please, please feel free to share your own answers in the comments. This is just a fun game. Let's have fun with it, folks. So share your answers and we'll see what happens. So, the first one is would you rather meet the hero or the villain from your favorite book?
Um, I would say now my favorite books are just kind of fighting
Yeah.
for control in my head. I'm just gonna go with Greenbone Saga.
Mm.
I don't know that it would be pleasant to me either. They they both have their own personality quirks, like, they're both the heads of their own respective, like, kind of this mafioso families,
Yep.
and so that would, Kilo would be really interesting to meet, um, so I'd probably rather meet him than, oh, I'm forgetting the head of uh, the mountain clan or the other
Oh,
clan.
no.
Uh, I'm a horrible fan now.
That's it.
Um,
Badge revoked.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's fair. I think when it comes to reading fantasy, it's a
Mhm.
toss up. Some
Yeah.
characters are just way too intense, hero or not.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go on to the next one. Would you rather crack the spine of a paperback or ruin the dust jacket of a hardcover?
Crack the spine. Um,
Out,
I'm
out,
I'm
you're
not
out.
too I'm not very precious with books, but,
Hmm.
like, ruin the dust jacket, like, I if I wanna see it on the shelf, I want the dust jacket to be there, but cracked spine doesn't hurt me.
So I'm going to pose a follow-up question to this. What if
Yeah.
it's the indie paperbacks where the artwork is
On the spine?
on the actual like naked hardcover in addition to the dust jacket? Does it matter then?
No,
Okay.
I think I'd still stay with I'd crack the spine. It's never bothered me too much.
That's fair. I'm very careful with any of my books, so
Yeah.
both make me cringe, but yeah. Those lines in the spine and actually reading the physical book that way for me, it's I would rather the dust jacket be gone
Oh,
because
really?
that feeling of the book falling apart at that specific spine crack,
Hmm.
I hate it, and then fighting with it the rest of the way once you pass it to keep the book open. All right, let's see. In terms of, let's see, genres,
Mhm.
would you rather write in poetry or fantasy for the next year?
Uh, Definitely fantasy. I think
Mm,
right now at this point in my life, I've really gravitated towards longer form storytelling.
mm,
Uh, Poetry I loved and I got into a lot. I still love it, but it's just not something that I gravitate towards as much right now.
fair, yeah. Continuing on with the writing, would you rather have Samwise Gamgee as your
Mhm.
writing bunny, keeping in mind he brings constant snacks and support, or Gandalf, who is wise but has a habit of disappearing?
As my writing buddy,
Yeah.
um, see, I'm torn because I I get too distracted with when I'm writing. If I have like too many things on, I can't listen to music. So I feel like Sam would always want to talk. He would have too many
Mm.
conversations. Uh, Gandalf would leave me alone, but he would also he'd also be a little bit grumpy and curmudgeonly. Um, I don't know. Maybe Gandalf. Gandalf would give me my silence. Samwise would not.
Mm.
Samwise would want to figure out how I'm feeling in the moment.
Right. That's fair. Yeah, I feel like Gandalf would, you might not even notice he's gone,
Yeah.
right? He would just sneakily wander off and then come back and you're like, "Oh, you were away?" See, I might I would the snacks. It's the snacks for me
Mm,
from Sam. I love food. So if someone's constantly
fair.
making me food, I will yeah, let's do stuff.
I would never
Let's
get anything done though.
yeah, but food. My I'm
Fair.
singularly focused.
Okay. Fair.
I'm also notorious for snacking while I do productive stuff. It keeps me
Yeah.
focused. So if I have something to fiddle with, to like snack on, have a tea, I'm golden. But if I have just pure silence of like no means of doing anything in addition to my productivity, I start to get distracted
Okay.
easily. So I think for me, it would be Sam. I don't write, but I'm thinking in terms of productivity. In terms of, again, your own writing, would you rather write a novel without any dialogue ever or write one composed entirely of dialogue?
Let me just start by saying I don't think either would be good. Um,
Understandable.
I I could see writing especially a shorter story or a shorter novelette where it
Mm,
is 100% without dialogue, a lot
mm,
easier than only dialogue, especially if it's a very kind of POV focused thing where you're really in somebody's head, you're really in a character's
mm.
head, kind of experiencing a world, almost like have you ever played those really like silent video games where you're just kind of exploring a world? It's more
Mm.
ethereal. There's less
Yeah.
you're actually doing, but you're more like jumping around in this beautiful landscape.
Yeah.
I could see a story like that being told through interactions and through just the inner dialogue of somebody's mind a
Yeah.
lot clearer than I could see only dialogue.
Okay. Yeah, that's entirely fair. I think some of the most impactful pieces of like movies or films tend to be those that have minimal to no dialogue, but they're
Yeah.
very, very evocative. So yeah, I can see that. Would you rather have an endless supply of fresh ideas, but never finish a manuscript, or finish every book you start, but it only ever feels like half of your vision is captured?
Oh, those are both awful.
I
Um,
I didn't say they would be good options.
and I feel like I have the endless stream of ideas, but to never be able to capture one of them, that would be awful. On the other hand, always feeling like I didn't do enough or I didn't do a good job,
Mm.
um, there'd be so much self-doubt in that, and I would struggle. Um,
We bring the hard questions.
yeah, this is awful. This hurts much more than cracked spine. Uh, I think I would go with just never feeling like the vision is realized. I
Mm,
want to complete the stories, even if I don't feel like they're completely there. Um, I think getting caught up in just never being able to finish a story, that would get at me in a different way. I love the ability to share a story. I don't think a story is actually a story until it's shared. It's just words on a paper.
right.
And so at that point, you're just daydreaming, which I love daydreaming. but you're not actually telling a story. You're not doing anything. You're
Mm.
just playing in your head, which is important. Um, but the lack of being able to share it with anybody, I think that would take away the joy.
Mm. Yeah. I could see that. To me, the definition there too would be the earned title of author, right? Having published a completed work
Yeah.
is, yeah. And we have Mark with us. Hello, Mark. Always good to see you.
Hey.
Thanks for stopping by. That's all right. There's plenty to catch up on later if you'd like to stay with us during the rest of this live. So, right now, Mark, what we are doing is playing Would You Rather. Feel free to pop your questions or your answers to these questions in the chat as we go along. For the next one, would you rather craft a twisty story that plot driven readers would love, or a deep emotional character study?
So I think I've done more of the latter.
Okay.
Um, No Heart for a Thief is especially like very much a character study kind of book.
Mm,
I think they get a little bit more plot heavy later on in the series. I think it's more interesting to me right now. I love a deep character study, but I think
mm.
the challenge for me right now is I want to learn more about how to plot interesting, like complex plots that
Okay.
weave in and out and challenge the reader to really grasp for what's going on at one moment and then think they have it the next and then switch it on them. I think that would be really interesting to challenge myself to do
Mm,
something a little bit more complicated with plot. The plots
yeah.
are interwoven in Malitu, but I would not say they're complicated. I wouldn't say that
Mm.
there's some reveals, but I wouldn't say that it's like somebody trying to figure out what's going on next. It's not a thriller. I
Yeah,
thought that
yeah.
would be really interesting.
Yeah, I think there's when you're reading fantasy, quite a bit of what I've read, there's always some kind of reveal or
Mhm.
foreshadowing that builds up to a reveal later on, but it's a completely different experience to reading the twists and turns of some kind of thriller,
Yeah.
no matter its genre. So yeah, there's definitely a whole difference in terms of plotting and scope
Yeah.
at that stage. So with that being in mind, because kind of talked a little bit about the plotting, would you rather, or planning, I should say, would you rather spend months world building every detail before writing, or dive into the first draft before build as you go, build the world as you go?
I mean, I kind of did the latter with No Heart for a Thief. I just kind of built everything as I went. I had some notes. I had some
Yeah.
thoughts about where I was going, but it was really a discovery writing kind of thing.
Mm,
Because I knew myself that if I didn't write it, I would just get too caught up in every last detail, and I didn't want to do that.
right.
Um, I think I'm definitely plotting out a lot more for this next series,
Mm,
um, and I'm enjoying that. But if I spend too much time doing it, I think I'll get lost in the weeds. So I'm gonna just dive in.
okay. So
Yeah,
discovery writing for that.
yeah.
Um, in terms of your reading, and maybe this will dip into writing as well. I'll
Mhm.
let you take the interpretation of it.
Yeah.
Would you rather read or write a beautifully written book with a terrible ending, or
With a terrible what? Sorry.
a terrible ending,
Okay.
or a poorly written book with an amazing ending?
Beautiful written book with a poor ending. The ending
Oh,
doesn't necessarily make or break a book for me,
yeah.
um, but dragging myself through 300, 400 pages of something I didn't like to get to something that's great. Like, I'm not somebody
Mm.
who's going to go to the candy store to get the most sour thing there is because at the end it tastes really good. Like, that's not me.
Just
Um,
describe my childhood.
I That is not my taste.
Yeah.
I would DNF before I got to the ending.
Okay.
So I want something beautiful that's gonna get me there, and then maybe the ending falls flat, but at least I enjoyed the rest of it.
Okay. Yeah, fair. I think I for myself, I'm a mix between the 2. I think it really depends on,
Oh,
the
beautiful with a good
characters.
ending.
I You know what? I've read books where I was, like, up to halfway through or 75%, I was just meh on it, and then that ending sold me, and I've read series based on that.
Okay.
So, it's hard for me to say because I've had both experiences, and
Yeah.
I think what really will end up getting me to stick through something is how well the characters land, ultimately. That's kind of my make or break. If the characters are I'm invested in them, even if the story is, you know, poorly written with a good ending, I'm like, "All right, yeah, I it was good. All right, I'll live
Yeah.
with it." Yeah, need to talk about the flawed masterpieces.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you still enjoyed it, but it's flawed.
Yeah.
We have Will with us. Good to see you, Will. Thank you for joining us. We are playing Would You Rather. So if you want to pop your answers in the comments, by all means, please feel free to share. In terms of reading, again, would you rather read a book with a morally gray protagonist you love or a noble hero you just can't stand?
Oh, morally gray protagonist that I love.
Brilliant.
Um, I mean, that's an easy one for me. If there's a character I love, I don't necessarily care if they're morally gray or if they're
Mm,
heroic in their actions. I'm not there to judge the character whether their morals align with me. I'm there
mhm.
to judge the characters whether they feel authentic on the page and whether they evoke something in me.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I'm fine with morally gray characters. This is
Yeah.
just as long as they're written well.
I'll agree with that. I've read everything between when it comes to characters. I've read terrible characters, um, like poor, bad choices all around. But I've also read characters that I absolutely can't stand. I wouldn't say they're noble, but they view themselves as noble.
Mhm.
Um, but they're so realistic. Like I've
Mhm.
met this person
Yeah.
and I hate them. And
That's
I'm not
fair.
alone. So,
No, no, I've
yeah.
definitely read, but I have DNF'd books because I can't stand the main POV.
Oh, yeah.
Even if they feel realistic or lived
Mm,
in, if I can't live in this person's head for books, for a
mm.
story, I'm not gonna enjoy my time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I think, it's so hard for me 'cause the example I'm using is Shauna Lawless's, Gale Song series, and there's one character called Tomas, which basically has a hate club. Not a fan club, a hate club for him, and one novella is very focused on him, and it's a story in between books, uh, is it before yeah, before books 1 and 2. So you've already met this character in book 1, you don't like him from book 1, and now you have a novella that gives you more details about him and his past and where he's coming from, and you still don't like him. But if you wanna keep going with the series, and have a little bit more knowledge as to, some backstory, then, you kinda have to read it. So it was like a love-hate read. I loved it, but I hated him.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of reading, would you rather read a single POV for an entire series or a multi POV?
Um, I think it would depend on how well it's done. I think I've done both. The difficulty with multi POV is it's easy to dislike one or multiple of them,
Mm,
and you want to continue along the story, but you turn the page and this new chapter and their names at the top of it, and you're like, damn it. um, Now I have to sludge my way through this person to get to something that I want to read.
yeah,
Um, and so I think that the multi POV is a higher level of difficulty to nail all of them. But if you go with the single POV, if you don't love that one, then you're screwed for the rest of the series.
yeah.
Um, and I would say that
Hmm.
was Dresden with me.
Okay.
I I don't like Dresden. I don't like Harry.
Yeah.
I think he can be very interesting at times, but I can't be in his head where he describes every woman he meets, whether they're integral to the story or not, chest first. Like that's it's not an enjoyable place to be.
Yeah.
Like you walked in, you saw a vampire who wants to kill you, and you're like, well, she has big chests. Like, I don't care. I don't care, Harry. Stop it. And so I stopped reading Dresden Files. I can't stand it. So I guess multiple POV. I think I just went on a rant that didn't make any sense, but whatever.
No, it made sense. I mean, I haven't read the Dresden file. It's not for me. I don't think, just based off of everything I've heard.
Yeah.
But anytime I do come across a fantasy where that's the only female archetype is her busty chest,
Yeah.
then yeah, I'm out. If that's all you can do for your female characters, then sorry. It's
And
I
it's
pet
a
peeve.
very weird world he's living in where everybody is top heavy. I'm like, come on. Everybody in this every woman in this world has back problems. I don't know why.
Absolutely. Yeah. To me, I would kind of classify it with like the old style superheroes, right? Very
Yeah.
defined chest, whether they're small or large, just
Hmm.
very defined, and very defined physiques, where that's the only type of
Yes.
female you see in those worlds. So yeah, um, as a female, I'm pudgy. If even if I'm small, I'm pudgy. I'm not gonna look like that ever. So pet peeve, yeah. Um, Also, just describe your characters a little,
Yeah.
give them some depth. Give them
Because
some individuality.
physical attributes are not a personality.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was far more articulate. Yeah. Oh, we're delving deep into the pet peeves. All right. let's uh let's dive a little bit back into your writing, and I'm curious what your answer is going to be, because
Hmm.
um you're at the end of a trilogy here. So, would you rather write a story with happy endings or tragic ones?
Um, can I do bittersweet? Um,
We'll put
I
that as option 3.
yeah. I like a bittersweet ending because I think you want to feel the weight of a story, and not everything was happy. Like there's something that you can sit in that wasn't happy, what didn't end well. But there's also some relief and some hope and some belief in the future. I like that kind of ending the most. But if I'm looking between bleak and happiness, I probably read more bleak.
Okay.
Um, but I've never tried cozy fantasy, so I need to try that out and see
Okay.
how I feel about it.
Okay. I see. I've done both in terms
Yeah.
of reading. I've read like Anna Smith Sparks, just pure, just terrible. Everything's there's not a happy bone in this world, or its people. And for me as a reader, I love being emotionally devastated. As
Yeah.
much as we finish a book, readers finish a book, and we go like, how could the author do that? At the same time, we're thinking like, thank you, that was awesome. I want to do it again. But then I've read also a lot of cozy fantasy, and I think what sells it for me for cozy fantasy is not so much the happy ending, but
Hmm.
seeing someone struggle and find their place.
Okay.
That is the reward for me, more so than the happy ending. The happy ending is like, oh, okay, happily ever after,
Yeah.
adventures after the fact. But I love seeing the process of someone. So, Guard in the Garden, for example,
Hmm.
soldier injured in battle, trying to find, like, always thought he would be a soldier, now told he can no longer serve, and is sent off to the middle of nowhere to live with his aunties as he struggles with physical disability and PTSD, but also being a soldier keeps it close to his chest,
Yeah.
and now needs to find a new direction in life and needs to pick up the broken pieces of himself. And so that journey is far more rewarding for me in terms of cozy fantasy, because I think that's a lot of the theme
Mhm.
that is explored in that genre is human connection and building a support group, finding your home, basically, right? Because a lot
Yeah.
of us do that in life. We find a person that we absolutely adore. We see our lives with them, and then we build a little get a little house and we build a home with it, right? And the
Yeah.
home being the family within it. So um they both have their place. I love a good book that will absolutely destroy me, but I also like seeing the journey of the human experience through cozy
Yeah.
fantasy. Yeah, so,
I,
if you
I
haven't tried cozy fantasy, that would be the one I would say.
I've seen that and I've definitely wanted to
Mm,
try it out. And I have a copy of Legends and Lattes, but I haven't gotten
mm.
into it yet.
Just based on our conversation, I think you would enjoy Garden the Gardens a lot more.
Okay.
I would say it's the strongest cozy fantasy I've read.
Okay.
Um, not and cozy fantasy in general will have some fluff to it, some feel good
Hmm.
stuff, but I do think Garden the Garden grounds it much better in real world experiences. So I think just based on our conversation, you might get more out of it
Yeah.
by starting with
'Cause,
that one.
like, I love Ted Lasso. It's one of my favorite shows that I've watched in the last several years.
Okay.
And I don't, have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
Um, it will get branded as this thing that is just fluffy and everybody's happy and blah blah blah, but
Mm,
there's some real tragedy and trauma within it as well that
okay.
that that makes the happiness all the more effective and
Mm,
necessary. It's about like finding the ability to come to terms with the grief in your life and come to
mm,
terms with the anger and all these negative emotions and then find your way to the happiness.
mm,
And so in a way it's there are some very dark moments, and I think those moments of darkness make the light so much more
mm.
glaring.
Yeah.
And so I do love those stories, so I definitely have to try it out in novel format.
Okay. Interesting. I'm writing that down to look into because yeah, again, that's I think I would say one of my more enjoyable experiences from stories is watching that growth. Like you said,
Yeah,
the light can be glaring because of how far down these characters can be. So I know we're reaching our 1 hour mark, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm wondering if you have time for one more question.
sure.
Okay, so this is outside of the would you rather. It's
Hmm.
a topic I would love to talk about if you're open to it because it's one that I think often gets shoved under the rug or glossed over in terms of just our online communities because we're so focused on reading and writing and stories, but we often don't talk about our own experiences and trying to balance that as parents.
Yeah.
I know we talked about this before going live.
Hmm.
You were talking a little bit about your experience as writing and your children and parenting and fatherhood. How do you balance all of that? And how has parenting impacted your storytelling?
To give you a little bit of a vantage point into it, when you were asking a question, the thing that popped up in my mind was the page of Cat in a Hat where he's balancing on a ball with a rake and a cake and a goldfish and all before he falls. That's how I balance it. Um, so
Lovely.
it doesn't necessarily feel like balance all the time.
Mm,
Um, I think a lot of it, to be the most honest, it's been conversations with my wife about what balance looks like for our household.
mm,
Um,
yeah,
because finding the time to write can be very difficult.
yeah.
So at one point, I was trying to get up early. This was when we just had the one kid, and I was trying to get up early and write before people were up, and then she would get him ready in the morning and feel rushed and blah blah blah. And so it was not fair for her to be doing that
Mm,
while I'm trying to work on this pursuit.
yeah.
So then I tried to write nightly after the kids were asleep, and that's the one time we can really hang out and have adult time together,
Yeah.
watch a show or talk or do whatever. And a marriage can't be a marriage if you're just there serving as daycare
Thank you.
together.
Yes.
And so that was difficult, and especially after the pandemic, because I used to just write on the train because I have an hour and a half commute into the city. So I just write on the train every morning and every evening when I come home. But then the pandemic happened and I went remote, and then after I went remote, I was in the city 2 times a week, and that wasn't enough to really move anything along.
Right.
So we kind of came to a schedule where I have my certain days of the week where after the kids go to bed, I write.
Hmm.
And then other days of the week, I am spending time with my wife.
Hmm.
When the kids are awake, I am not an author
Yeah.
because there's no ability to do that really. Um, and so it's a lot of communication and making sure that partnership is actually partnership.
Yeah.
Um, and trying to do the best as I can with that, because anything that you pursue is going to take away time from something else.
Yeah.
Um, I can't be the best version for my family of who I am without writing in my life.
Mm.
I've gone stretches without writing poetry or writing whatever, and I'm just not the fullest version of me. So I can't be that for them without it.
Right.
But if I give too much of myself to that, then I also am
Mm.
not giving them enough time. And so, again, balancing on the ball, trying to make it all work, not getting enough sleep, um,
Yeah.
all unhealthy things, trying to be the healthiest version of that. I don't know.
Yeah.
For
I
some reason, people haven't given me $1 million book deal so I can just write and have as much time as I want.
Yeah. How dare they? Come on,
It's
guys.
an injustice of the greatest proportions, I think.
It's a hard act to manage. It really is. Even I know I'm not an author, but as someone who does content creation
Yeah,
and managing schedules, like even these chats, well, we're in different time zones sometimes, and trying to coordinate that in the
yeah.
hours when I'm supposed to be mom, not
Mhm.
Kay on Kay's hidden shelf. It's hard finding time where like I have rules of my child will not be in videos.
Mhm.
I might mention some basic stuff about parenting, but I'm not going to plaster his face or his name all over the internet.
Okay.
And, that makes it harder to balance because we could be out and I could, oh, that's a cool shot for a video, but I'm here with my son and I'm on mom duty right now.
Yeah.
Um, come back another time or something like that, or manage it with my husband. And similar to you, I tried getting up early to read. I've tried doing the whole reading at night kind of thing, and as your kids grow, they change stages so quickly. It's like
Yes.
whiplash. You think you
Yeah.
have a routine, joke's on you. Kid
Mhm.
kid will change routine within a night.
Yeah.
It's fast how quick they will change that on you. So I did the whole waking up early, and what ended up happening was, my son it didn't matter if it was 4 AM. He would wake up and he'd be up
Yeah.
for the whole day. He could just I don't drop a pin, that kid wakes up. So, it was like that gif of, the lady drinking her coffee, and then someone walks in, she's like, "Oh my god, where did you come
Mhm.
from?"
Yeah.
Trying to read her book. That was the experience of it, and it wasn't fair to him because he was then waking up too early.
Yeah.
So, tried shifting it to evenings, had bedtime troubles. Right?
Mhm.
Didn't have energy, and I'm supposed to be spending like you, spend time with my partner so that we can be good, parents and be a good team together. So it's a really, interesting topic to delve into because everyone's experience of it is gonna be different,
Yeah.
and how you let that, influence your writing, which is the second question to it, which is I would love to hear is different for authors too. So how has, having children, if at all, influenced your storytelling?
Um, I I think that's a hard question to answer because I hadn't released a book. I had only been writing novels for such a short time, and like I maybe had a draft done by the time my firstborn was born.
Okay.
Um, so I've kind of always been a father
Yeah.
while I've been an author. Um, so I think it's hard to separate or delineate what has exactly happened in terms of challenges to my writing or changes in my writing because of that. I would
Mm-hmm.
say um, there's an interesting thing about, I think this generation of parenting is one of the expressed goals is to treat children as people rather than property.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a generational thing that a lot of us have to unlearn.
Yeah.
Um, and in the same way, I try to create characters as people, not property, and allow them to be themselves. And so I think maybe some of that has some crossover and trying to think about how do you allow this person, this idea that needs guidance, also room to grow in an authentic and natural way,
Mm.
uh, even if it doesn't align with your plans. Um, and that can be difficult, but it's an important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I imagine, well, I'm just going to ask instead of imagining,
Yeah.
since I have you, in terms of reaching those moments of you don't always agree with the choices that your characters are making. As an author, how do you navigate those circumstances and ensure that it's still aligning with what you had envisioned for
Hmm.
the story?
Um, it's interesting because I think when authors get too much into the talking about their characters like they're a live person, sometimes I even roll my eyes. I'm like, oh God, that's pretentious. Um, and so the idea isn't that they're an actual person who make
Mm,
decisions. The idea is that um, the decisions that you want them to make aren't always in line with the character that you built. And
okay, I see.
so trying to be authentic to the character that you built and uh, have some thought of plot and where you're going is can be difficult because that character is they weren't built for each other necessarily. They were daydreamed up and they took life on their own. And as you wrote more about them, you discovered more about who you wanted this character to be. And plots aren't necessarily as organically growing in
Mm,
terms of like an endpoint, if you have it in your mind, remains an endpoint. You're not thinking about how that endpoint feels or would feel because it's just an event. Whereas you
mm,
are thinking about these characters as if they were real, how would they adapt to the world around them? And
mhm.
so to align those can be difficult. And I think what I do is I try not to be too precious with the idea of what I had for the story. Like
Okay.
if if a plot point needs to change because a plot point needs to change, then that's fine.
Mm,
I rewrote probably the last third to a quarter of No Safe Haven because the ending just wasn't working. It was not in line with what characters would choose to do.
mm,
Um, and so I had to figure out another way around that. And
mm.
try to keep in mind that some of these endpoints need to happen for the story to progress, but not be too precious about how they get there, maybe.
Yeah. I think that's completely fair. You know, you're dealing with it. It kind of reminds me of parenting in a way, in that sense, because you set the foundation for your child, but they are their own person. You have to let them grow and learn in their own ways.
Yeah.
Um, but treating them like real people, as you said, in that regard, um, because as the reader, I also want to make sure, a big part of what I enjoy in characters is when the author can do justice by them by
Mhm.
not by keeping the integrity to the character and their reactions to certain circumstances. So it's no secret that I dislike a lot of romantasy tropes because they sacrifice the integrity of the character's
Mhm.
personality for an event or for a plot
Yeah.
contrivance. And so that's where, for me, I really appreciate it as a reader, because if you can sustain the integrity of the character's personality that you've developed, despite everything going on, it makes it far more enjoyable to read and stay invested in the character's journey.
I think that's where I hear a lot of authors or a lot of readers complain about how men write women, or I'll
Mm,
hear about how white people write characters of color,
mm,
and they're they're not allowing these characters the ability to move through the world as they would. They're moving through the world as it needs to fit plot. And so I will often be taken out of the story when I'm reading a man write a woman, and the woman just kind of changes personality to fit in line with the main character's desire.
yeah,
Um, it takes me out of it. Or you have a black character that's there serving in some role, and they don't have a full personality. They're just kind of there as a signpost of this world also has black characters.
yeah,
And so you kind of get lost in the mix if your characters don't make decisions, whether they're the main focal point of that book or not. But if the characters don't make decisions in line with something that is apart from the plot, then it just feels like everything is too convenient. That everything
right.
is working towards a plot rather than working towards individual characters' purposes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Absolutely. So I know we are over the hour point. I don't want to
Yes.
take too much of your time, because I know we've got kids, man. We got it's a weekend
Yeah.
in the morning. Those kids are waiting for us. So thank you so much for joining me today, for not only delving into these topics, but playing a little game alongside it,
Or
trying something a bit different. And for everyone who is watching now or later in the replay, thank you so much for watching with us. All of the links for James' books will be down in the description below, as well as following him on social media and whatnot. Um, for you, James,
mhm.
what's the best way people can stay up to date for new updates, new stories, or just in general? How can they stay in touch with you?
I think the best way is my newsletter. So if you go to jamesldulin.com, you can sign up for my newsletter. I send updates there. I let people know things in advance. And I try to stay in touch. It's never anything that's more than a monthly newsletter, so I'm not going to bombard you. But if you're interested in finding out what's happening next, or anything about the stories or me as an author, check that out. I try to, be pretty open about my authorial experience, and I'll publish blogs, whether that's on my website or another site. And so I'll share those on the newsletter as well. So keep up with me there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again. Congratulations on
Thank
book three,
you.
completing a trilogy. And I mean, well, I'm really curious what comes next. So
Yeah. Thank
I
you
think
for having me.
absolutely. Thank you so much. And as always, everyone, have a wonderful, wonderful day and take care of yourselves.